Amb tots nosaltres rebem amb un fort aplaudiment el doctor Alejandro Ruelas-Gossi.
Molt bona tarda. Estic aprenent català. Okay, guys, I'm going to touch two principles today. I'm going to take advantage of being Pompeu Fabra, the guy who came up with the grammar of Català. I'm going to talk a little bit about the grammar of management. I mean, try to redefine some concepts that for some reason they are like laws of physics and they are not. Let me start perhaps with mentioning one movie of perhaps you have seen it is Inception. Inception is from Chris Nolan. Chris Nolan is a very adventurous film director. This guy is the guy who came up with the Bantam trilogy and all those kind of films that have been very controversial, or Memento, or Insomnia, or whatever. In Inception, the idea is that you can have an idea put in the minds of others, and the people are going to be performing, behaving according to the idea you put in their minds. For some reason, we have the same kind of phenomenon today in our minds in management. For the last 30 to 40 years, we have been incepted in our minds. We don't notice that. It's like the dreams and the cinema. Chris Nolan is famous because he used the dreams metaphor for the cinema. In the same way that we, in the visual cortex of our brain, we have some photograms that are incepted in our minds. The same happens when we are looking at those concepts. So dreaming and cinema is pretty much the same thing. So we have been incepted with concepts for the last 30 years that are not right. Let me start first with the definition of competitiveness. Competitiveness today, unfortunately, means low price. Low-cost practices, because I don't want to call low-cost a strategy. Low-cost is not a strategy, it's a practice. A strategy is when you are really bringing up value, and low-cost is not doing that thing. So competitiveness today is defined as the less expensive at the cheapest one. It's to make cheaper the past. If you really want to invest in the future, you need to think. Low-cost companies are not thinking, are just making the past cheaper. And most of companies are doing that. Let me perhaps illustrate that with Walmart. Walmart is perhaps the company that is famous for being the king of low-cost practice. This company, perhaps you are not aware of this, but this company is receiving $8 billion per year because most of the employees who work for Walmart are below of the line of poverty in the US. The US, there is not a minimal salary, but unfortunately, because of that thing, you need to give them money. So taxes are paying for the employment in Walmart. Walmart is the most pathetic company in the world. And unfortunately, it's been imitated by many. We have our own Walmart here in Spain. Unfortunately, I don't want to say names, but we have a bunch of supermarkets that behave exactly like Walmart. And if you go to any supermarket, you will see so many discount signals that perhaps it's easier to know what do you not have with discount. So it's like a culture that unfortunately is being pervading everywhere. Let me perhaps bring the example of the most amazing company in the history of companies, the Apple of Steve Jobs. The Apple of Steve Jobs is totally different. It was almost 14 weeks to be in bankruptcy when he took back in 1997. And he converted Apple in the most amazing company in the history of companies. And that company was never cheap. A strategy happens when you define the price, not the market. When you are not defining the price, you are not strategizing. You are following someone else. So price is a very important variable. Unfortunately, with Tim Cook today, Tim Cook is really ruining the company today. I was delivering a speech in Stanford 2 years ago, precisely about that Apple was going to have problems. That was 2 years ago, when Apple is supposed to be doing well. Today, we know that Apple, for the first time in 13 years, the sales are being reduced. And just 2 weeks ago, Tim Cook said in India that the iPhone was very expensive. Unfortunately, Tim Cook is taking the company to the metrics of poverty, delivering on time, the lowest cost, and the best quality. Those things are not important for a strategy. We need to come with something different. So there is a very interesting interview that I recommend for you to do, to see it. It's the Lost interview, Steve Jobs, 1995. Please think what you were doing in 1995, okay? In 1995, Steve Jobs was in that interview, and he was explaining how the world was going to be in the digital scenario. And he was explaining that day, he said the post-PC era. And he said very clear that the post-PC era was going to be a small device that you could carry in your hands, and all the sales were going to be through internet. I mean, remember, 1995. He said, everything is going to be through internet, and all your life is going to be around that device. In 1995. He was talking about the iPhone, of course. When the reporter asked him, how do you know that you are going to be in the right direction? The answer of Steve Jobs was, ultimately, it comes down to taste. It's about to be exposed to the best that human beings have done and try to incorporate all that into what you offer into the audience. Taste. I need to confess that the first time I heard that, I said, taste? Was this guy smoking something, or what does he mean by taste? But in another interview, you know, I had to do lots of research, because when I was invited to be in front of Apple people talking bad things about Tim Cook wasn't easy. So I was watching hundreds of hours of video of Steve Jobs. And then I found one from 2007, 12 years after the Lost interview. Why that interview was never transmitted? Was in 1995. Why? Because at that time, Steve Jobs didn't have a job. Who cared about what Steve Jobs was saying? But when Steve Jobs died in 2011, everyone was looking for what do we have about Steve Jobs, and they found it. That's why it's called the Lost interview. Okay, in the 2007, another interview with Bill Gates, they asked Bill Gates, Mr. Gates, if you could start your career over, and you could pick a specific characteristic of Steve Jobs, what would you pick? The answer was, I could give a lot for having a Steve taste. So the audience was laughing, and then Bill Gates said, no, don't laugh. We were around the Macintosh 84 design, and everyone was concerned about productivity, engineering, blah, blah. The only one who was concerned about what people were going to feel was Steve Jobs. You can perhaps remember of what someone said, or perhaps something that someone did, but you will never forget how does someone make you feel. So it's about feelings, it's about emotion, but it's about something else. So when I realized that both Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were talking about taste, I realized that there was something interesting behind taste. What a best place to talk about taste than being in Barcelona, the place of the most amazing architect in history, the king of asymmetry in architecture. And this guy, I mean, they allowed him to put all the things in Barcelona. Barcelona is about value. It's about being different. It's not about low cost, please. It's not about having the cheapest price. It's about being really different. So what is taste anyway? I tried to study, to do some research about, from the anthropological point of view, ontological and epistemological, what is taste? I found Immanuel Kant. Kant was the guy who separated the subject from the object. So aesthetics is very important. Everything was about taste. So taste is about a very nice surprise that is provoking in your brain a specific dopamine, oxytocin, that is giving you pleasure. It's exactly the opposite that happens with low cost. Low cost, because of the spirit of low cost, is about being in a survival mode. You are always fearing that the next day is going to come up someone who is going to be less expensive than you. You are always in a survival mode. The same way the people who go to war are segregating a serotonin that is producing bitterness. I mean, all this is scientific. Bitterness is associated with low cost, and taste is associated with pleasure, with relax, with feeling better. And more than that, an amazing surprise that is provoking in you good emotions, good feelings, is exactly what a gift is. Apple used to be the gift factory. Even the boxes around the products were like gifts. You were receiving a gift. And an amazing surprise that is provoking things in you, in the management grammar, we call that innovation. Innovation is a pleasant surprise. That is the spirit of innovation. Surprise someone. Nice surprise. It's like receiving a gift. That was exactly what Steve Jobs was trying to do. So don't go into the bad practice of low cost. That is totally wrong. I mean, when we have low cost, that means that we have low salaries. Do you know this is coming from the Black Friday in the US? The Black Friday is a very bad day. It's the last Friday of November, when companies are trying to sell the cheapest they can because they have to get rid of inventory. That is the idea behind Black Friday. It's a black day. It's not a good day to go for cheap things. It is not. Because cheap things mean that your salary is going to be cheap. You're going to pay suppliers cheap. So the companies are going to sell less. And if you sell less, taxes are going to be less. Salaries are going to be less. The programs for education are going to be reduced. The investment in R&D is going to be less because that is a percentage of sales or percentage of profits. When everything is very cheap, you don't have money for that anymore. So we are risking a whole generation for the new inventions. So low cost is creating not just poverty, but also ignorance, because education is going to be affected as well. Poverty and ignorance as a result of low cost. But like the biblical figure of the wheat and weeds, you don't see which one is wheat or weeds until they deliver fruit. Weeds never deliver fruit. Bueno, me voy a cambiar ahora al siguiente tema. El siguiente tema es el tema del manager, el tema del gerente. Porque quisiera también retar la posición del gerente. El gerente es una posición del siglo XX. Viene del latín manus, mano. En italiano es maneggiare, cómo controlar un caballo que va en movimiento. Y también de mansión, del francés ménage, cómo administrar una entidad. Ese puesto es un puesto del siglo XX que ya no nos sirve. Tenemos que redefinir cómo llevar un negocio. Y yo quisiera ofrecer para ello la música. Los directores de orquesta en la música solamente tienen menos de 150 años. La música tiene siglos. Pero es hasta menos de 150 años cuando a alguien se le ocurre que necesitamos directores de orquesta. Y yo quisiera que ustedes tomaran ese rol, hoy que están graduando, en esa nueva gramática del management, lo que Pompeu Fabra hizo en su momento en la gramática del catalán. Ustedes también pueden empezar una nueva gramática. La nueva gramática es el nuevo puesto, el nuevo líder ya no es un manager. El héroe del management del siglo XX ha sido el manager, el gerente. El héroe ahora es el director de orquesta. Y regresemos de nuevo a Steve Jobs, no podemos evitarlo. En la última película, la biografía de Steve Jobs, es fascinante cuando en la película lo cuestionan mucho y él siempre contesta: yo solamente estaba orquestando. El iPhone, el iPad, que son el primero y el segundo producto más exitosos en la historia de la humanidad. Costó $300 millones el desarrollo del iPhone y da aproximadamente 100 billones al año. Este producto, totalmente diferente, con un precio muy alto. Steve Ballmer, que era director general de Microsoft, cuando fue lanzado el iPhone, se rió, dijo: $500 un teléfono y que a la mayoría lo va a pagar el carrier, qué tontería. Pues fue un éxito, el mayor de toda la historia. El pensar que una persona pobre quiere un producto pobre es una idea muy pobre. La gente no quiere cosas pobres. La gente quiere cosas a las que pueda aspirar. Y este director de orquesta, Steve Jobs, sabía que era especialista en la miniaturización, en el diseño y en la facilidad de uso. En eso era experto. En todo lo demás no. En todo lo demás sabía que las debilidades que él tenía no había que mejorarlas, como a veces hacemos. A veces en las empresas hacemos una lista de fuerzas y debilidades y tratamos de mejorar las debilidades. Cuando mejoramos las debilidades, ¿saben qué pasa? Que estamos pareciéndonos a los de enfrente y al final todos son iguales. Se nos ha dicho que nadie es indispensable. Claro, en esa filosofía de sameness, de que todo el mundo se parece, nadie es indispensable. Pero cada uno de nosotros somos únicos, somos indispensables. Lo que hizo Steve Jobs fue encontrar lo más importante que él tenía, que era la miniaturización, la facilidad de uso, el diseño. Todo lo demás lo orquestó. Si tú tomas tu smartphone, que es el diseño dominante de Steve Jobs, te darás cuenta que hay Shazam, WhatsApp, Skype y una cantidad de apps interminable. Cada app representa una compañía inteligente que Steve Jobs estaba orquestando. La estrategia se orquesta, no se planea. El valor se orquesta, no se agrega. Lo que nosotros necesitamos es que ustedes primero identifiquen en qué son diferentes, en qué son los únicos. Y las regiones del mundo también son únicos en diferentes cosas. Y que una vez que hagas esto, trates de orquestar a los demás alrededor tuyo. Y que la oferta de valor sea una orquesta de instrumentos musicales que son valiosos per se, pero que una orquesta son mejores. Muchas gracias.